The ABC News presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. The first debate, but perhaps the only, saw fiery exchanges between the two candidates. Here it is.
I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy.
I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation. She is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden.
I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country.
Well, the showdown marked the 7th time that Trump has debated on the big stage, but was the first real test of Kamala Harris. Jackson Proskow has been following this. He's outside the debate hall in Philadelphia. Jackson, great to see you. So, given all that, 90 minutes, a lot of clips, of course, that people can choose from. Who came out ahead, do you think?
Well, Anthony, I think what's so remarkable about last night is the performance of Kamala Harris and how she managed to flip the script. And that seems to be what really stands out here. She is effectively the incumbent. She's the current vice president, part of the current administration. What she did last night, though, was put Donald Trump on the defensive and almost make it seem like he is the incumbent, forcing him to defend his record and many of his policy positions. And time again, she was effectively able to bait him into veering off course, veering into personal attacks, not talking about his key policy positions. Just one example of that, for example, was the issue of immigration. And Harris was asked about her record on the issue and her policies on the issue. She finished her answer by talking about people leaving Donald Trump's rallies. And when the question was turned over to Donald Trump, instead of Trump talking about his favorite issue, the thing he loves to talk about, immigration, he then was on the defensive, talking about his rallies and talking about a conspiracy theory about people eating pets in a small town in Minnesota, something that has been completely debunked. That gives you a sense of how the night went off the rails, but also about how Kamala Harris, as the former prosecutor, was effectively able to lead Donald Trump like a hostile witness and get him to do and say exactly the kind of things she wanted him to say.
But ultimately, the big test is in November. How could last night's debate impact voters?
So heading into last night, polls suggested that 7 in 10 Americans were going to be watching, and as many as 30% of those voters were looking at last night as something that would help them decide who they would ultimately vote for. Kamala Harris in particular faces a lot of questions about who she is and what she stands for. Yes, she's the current vice president, but let's be honest, people don't pay attention to vice presidents regardless of who they are. So she entered the campaign historically late. She has to introduce herself to American voters, and last night was just the beginning of that process. And polls ahead of the debate suggested about 30% of voters said they wanted to know more about where Kamala Harris stands on the issues. She used last night to outline some of her policy positions, but Anthony, I think you could make the argument that she still has a long way to go. And so last night was the beginning, perhaps, of making voters comfortable with who she is and where she stands on the issues. I think the debate, though, left a lot of voters looking for more questions, and you certainly saw Harris's team come out immediately after the debate and say, we will do another debate with Donald Trump in October. Remains to be seen if Trump will accept that. He had proposed another debate in September, and it's not really clear where that stands at this point.
All right, you mentioned a long way to go, but there's not a long period of time before the election, of course. And you wonder if this interesting tidbit will have any influence on this. There was a major endorsement last night. Talk about that and if that will have any significance.
Yeah, the endorsement came from Taylor Swift the moment the debate concluded, and this is no small thing. She has 283 million followers on Instagram. She speaks specifically to younger voters, Gen Z voters, and younger millennials. And this is a group of voters that typically don't turn out in the same levels that older voters do. So if she can convince them to sign up and vote and get out and vote, that is no small thing. We should point out that Taylor Swift sort of brought up two things in her endorsement of Harris. One is that she referred to herself as a childless cat lady in reference to controversial comments made by Trump's running mate J.D. Vance, where he has sort of disparaged women who do not have children. The other thing she addressed, though, were these fake AI-generated images of her that Trump has been circulating, where it tried to make it look like she was endorsing Donald Trump. So she came out last night, set the record straight, and said she is firmly behind Kamala Harris and Tim Walz.
Interesting stuff. It's going to be an interesting, 8 weeks, give or take, until the election. And I know you'll be following very closely. We'll be keeping tabs with you as this progresses. Thank you so much, Jackson. That is Jackson Proskow joining us from Philadelphia.